Hi guys, welcome back to another episode. So, following up my chat with Ching Ho on what he learned with wheelchair fencing, we now have Josh Waddel back with us to discuss his impressions of the first time able-bodied fencers fence him in a wheelchair, how they adapt, what they can learn, or what they do learn from fencing him. So let's do sort of introductions. We'll go for Ching Ho and then Josh, and then you can start us up, Josh, later on.
Yeah, I'll go first. Hi, I'm Ching Ho. My experience with wheelchair fencing is kind of that as mentioned in a previous episode, I fenced wheelchair fencing in Hong Kong sporadically as my coach was the former Paralympic coach. So I had the privilege of being able to fence with the Hong Kong Paralympic team once in a while. Coming to Durham, I also had the privilege of training under Laszlo Jakab, the former Paralympic coach for GB, and that meant that I also had the privilege to train against the students, Josh being one of them.
Yeah, and I'm Josh. I'm the wheelchair fencer, I guess. Yeah, so I've trained in Durham for almost 10 years now, so it's going well. It's a long process. It's going well.
All right, mate. So let's say typical able-bodied fencer comes first time to fence you. You must notice something that all able-bodied fencers do first time they're in the chair.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is the equipment, especially in Ebe. So we have kind of so in wheelchair Ebe, it's only the waist up. That's the target. So we wear it's kind of like a lame material, and it does like the opposite job. So if you hit, it won't kind of register the hit, and it's kind of like a skirt or an apron, which you wrap around your waist, and the band rests on your hip bone. So the first question is like, oh, how do I put it on? So I have to explain, and they eventually put it on, and then they sit down, and then they ask like how they plug in, because of course they're not kind of used to kind of the box being so close to where they fence, and they're used to kind of pieces where they clip in and then they can just leave it. But in a wheelchair, it kind of just like hangs behind your side. So I would say those are two main big questions when you first get into the chair, and then before we even start fence, I've got to kind of explain how the distance works and how we measure up. Yeah, the tips of the elbow.
Yeah,
for Ebe at least. And then from there, I kind of explain how we move. I kind of tell them that you can lunge. I tell them, what's too much and what's too little in terms of the rules, like how far you're allowed to lunge, and that you kind of need to hold on to the bar, because that's kind of a big aspect where they'll go to lunge and they'll forget that there's a bar to help. So
okay, so that's the bar on the back of the chair, right?
Yeah. So I'm right-handed, so I would fence with right arm fencing. My left arm would be on kind of the bar, which is quite close to really close to your hip, which you push off and you can pull off to try and aid that movement.
Okay. I gotta say, have you had anyone get out of the chair when you tried to hit them?
All the time.
Okay, yeah, because that's my first experience. I fenced wheelchair saber, but actually in a normal chair. And when the guy tried to riposte, I was already 3 meters back. I had to wrap my legs around the chair so I wouldn't escape.
Yeah, it's I guess it's something that you kind of learn over time. I think Ching Ho could explain the feeling a bit better, because I can't really explain that?
I don't know about that because my first ever wheelchair bout was against someone in the national team of Hong Kong, and because the setup was already quite professional, my first ever wheelchair bout was in a Paralympic wheelchair. So then because I kind of researched wheelchair fencing before the training session, because I didn't want to embarrass myself. I realized that I came to the realization quite quickly that I couldn't run away. It was against the rules. So then I was just like, okay, I just won't run away then, I guess, and I'll just sit there and do whatever I need to do.
All right, Josh. So you fenced a lot of able-bodied fences.
Yeah.
Right? They're a little confused when they get in, but how do you introduce them to wheelchair fencing? How do you beat them that first time?
I think it's me personally. I don't like to beat them 15-0 straight away. You know, because it's kind of like a new. It's kind of like meeting a person for the first time. Like you don't want to have a bad impression, or you don't want to make them feel bad. So it's kind of the same thing, you know. So we'll fence about 3 fights to 5. You know, and I think the important thing is to get that interaction for present and future matches, is to allow the able-bodied fencers to actually experience wheelchair fencing and not just experience getting hit.
Okay. So what do you think are their main tactical weaknesses when they first step into sit into the chair?
I mean, yeah. So again, it changes fencer by fencer, but I think the big thing is distance. So of course, wheelchair fencing is sat a lot closer than able-bodied, and it's just trying to find the distance where they can parry, where they can do the circular seesaw or the counter, or the flick to back if they really want to. But yes, I'll say just distance and hand speed. So hand speed is a big part of wheelchair fencing. If we can't move away, then we've got to just go faster, because we can't. Yeah, we can't really accelerate with the legs, so we've just got to have quick hands.
So do you think able-bodied fencers actually benefit? They benefit their hand speed by practicing in the chair?
I would say so, definitely. Just because, well, Ching Ho can probably say better, but from what I can see from just watching Durham Uni and the people who I train with, as soon as they fence me for maybe like a month, then they can gradually see an improvement in the hand speed, or just how quick they can take the power post, or how quick they can take the blade in season hit. And it's just like small things that you learn from a wheelchair fencer, like that you wouldn't necessarily realize in able-bodied fencing.
Wow, let's ask Ching Ho.
Sure. I would definitely say the same. I feel like, because I feel like out of a lot of people in the club, I fence Josh the most frequently. I definitely benefit the most. Whereas, sure, other people fence Josh as well, but at the same time, their arm strength and their arm speed, it's little things, and they're not very obvious, and I wouldn't say there is that significant of an improvement, but there will be definitely moments where they take my blade and I think to myself, okay, I didn't realize that you could do that, or I didn't realize that your blade take got a little bit sharper compared to before. And from the way that they take the blade, I'm inclined to believe that it comes from a lot more of the fencing wheelchair a lot more in comparison to just only fencing able-bodied.
Nice. I mean, a little bit. I mean, we're always looking for that few percent, right? So I don't think that's nothing. Nice. Now, when we talked last time, Ching Ho, you talked about having to make your decisions faster and be ready when the ref is calling. Go right, because everything is so fast. What do you think about that, Josh? Do you think it's people learn to make their decisions faster?
You could say learn, you could say adapt. It's you kind of like force them to. So if we're in a really competitive situation, and they've started to develop a bit more in wheelchair fencing, then then it will be in guard, pray, alley, and I will go straight off that alley as quick as I can, direct attack. And if they can't react, then they're just going to get hit. And I guess it's up to them to kind of realize that they've got to kind of switch on before no, or just switch on a bit quicker, or just probably just think less and just think less and do it, and just because you can't overthink in a wheelchair. Like, you've really just not got the time.
Now, I know you're a coach, so I'm sure that you're thinking about tactics. When you say can't think, you mean you've already decided before the ref is calling, right? You've already adapted, and then you're just doing your action, right?
Yes. So especially in that phase of unguard ready fence, you've got that time to assess your opponent's blade position, the previous hit.
Yep.
But you can't dwell on that hit because you've not got time to dwell on that hit and think of the next. So it's kind of a split-second process that just gets quicker over time, and then eventually, in able bodies, they get quicker at making the same process, which then, from what I can see, it just makes the prep a lot more. It makes it a little sharper, and it's got a bit more intent because they're focused on what they need to do because they've already processed it.
Now, you watch a lot of able-body fencing, right? The guys that you fence in the wheelchair. Do you think it actually? Can you see it improving them?
Yeah, sometimes. Mainly just I don't think directly they don't notice too much, but I think it's kind of the split-second stuff that they won't recognize until they kind of reflect on the fight. It's only until they kind of reflect, but like kind of a before and after wheelchair fencing, then they would see the greatest difference. But I think it's just small, gradual. It's not even changes, it's just enhancements, improvements, just anything you want just to progress the fencing.
Ching Ho, what do you think?
Yeah, expanding on what Josh had to say about tactics, and I definitely was on the receiving end of a lot of touches where I overthought a lot of stuff because I had the space to do those complex things in épée. Say for example, maybe I would do a sixth octave invite and then try some third intention rubbish that would work perfectly fine in able-bodied because the distance is so big. But because the distance is so small in wheelchair fencing, you have to focus on the direct ways to get the point, and you have to, and at the same time, the cramped space in wheelchair fencing means that the details of your actions are more important because you can have the best third intention stuff in the world, but at the same time, if your execution of all those moves isn't very good. The close distance means that it's way easier to get hit in a wheelchair trying to do that third intention stuff as opposed to in able-bodied. Now I'm not saying that third intention stuff was the best idea to do in wheelchair fencing, but it's just an example of how overcomplicating stuff can really, really hurt you in wheelchair fencing. For me, wheelchair fencing, it's a bit more like a game of if able-bodied fencing resembles the game of Go, I would say that wheelchair fencing tends closer towards a game of chess, where people are just constantly adjusting over and over again to their opponent's moves simply because the moves happen in such a quick amount of time.
Yep. I remember you saying that training at a very close distance with strong blade actions and very fast blade actions helped you handle able-bodied fences when they rushed you and tried to close you down.
Yeah, I think now that I thought about what I said more, I think this is kind of how I dealt with wheelchair fencing in order to try and make it more familiar, because not everyone has to be strong on the blade the first time they go into wheelchair fencing to improve. It's just that because I was strong on the blade even before coming onto wheelchair fencing, it just meant that, say when I'm fencing Josh, and I didn't know who he was, all I knew that he had long arms and had a very rangy attack. My first idea of what to do was to control his blade so that I would be in a more familiar scenario, because if I extended and Josh extended at the same time, Josh would definitely hit me first.
No, mate, you got no chance.
And I don't learn anything from that. And I just lose 15-0 because his point will reach my body faster than mine will hit his. So then I have to do something about that. And the first thing I do about it is to engage his blade in a certain way, and from there we'll see how it goes. And that's how wheelchair fencing evolves, because from there it gets more and more complex, and then that's when you start to see like the tactical subtleties and the technical subtleties that people are demonstrating when they fence each other.
Yeah, I'd say they're slightly different games, but they could be used to complement each other. I'd take a strength from one and put it in the other, for sure. Well, Josh, what do you think? What do you think is the one thing that able-bodied fencers could learn from fencing in the wheelchair? Or, so a skill that they could take out, they could develop in that shorter environment and then transfer into their able-bodied game? Or maybe you've seen it, actually.
Yeah, so I think blade work and hand speed, they kind of go hand in hand almost.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the major thing, because the mental aspects surrounding it, you can develop that in able-bodied fencing just with a bit more experience. But I think the speed of hand is something that you can only learn, or helps to learn, in a wheelchair, just because you're forced to learn it. It's not like a lesson where if you get it wrong, you can just restart, and it's that a long process. It's kind of like if you sit in that chair and your hand speed doesn't go up, then you're just going to get hit so much more. So it kind of forces you to improve at a higher rate than you would if you wouldn't do wheelchair fencing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, does anyone have another insight?
From just fencing Ching Ho, I know on the last episode that you mentioned that we had kind of a friendly rivalry.
Well, that's the best type of rivalry in a club, right? Between clubmates, forcing each other to get better. That's the dream.
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest thing. So if me and Ching Ho have a really intense match, and we'll have multiple fights, and they go both ways, and it's really, really close, then it's kind of that atmosphere breeds something else for the rest of the cell. So if we're pushing each other, I think speaking in terms of Team Durham and the fencing club, we kind of push them to kind of compete a bit more, or train a bit harder, or push that bit further than they wouldn't have if we weren't competing, or if we weren't competing with each other to try and better each other.
I mean, I hope they think that way, because I still feel like some unnamed members of the club, who shall not be named, don't demonstrate the same level of competitiveness that our rivalry kind of exudes. But I think that's okay, because not everyone takes it seriously to the same level that we both do. I think, but at the same time, it's still a gradual process of. Sure, I'm not asking that everyone has to pair up with someone and like have an intense friendly rivalry with them, but at the same time, it encourages people to look up at people who they think could be rivals, because realistically, I'll never fence Josh ever in a truly competitive kind of scenario. I won't see him in my pool at like a senior domestic or a senior international, and he won't see me in his pool in
Tokyo 2021.
Yeah, I won't. He won't see me in his pool. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that just because we'll never compete against each other, doesn't mean that we don't do the best for each other, and it doesn't mean that when I beat Josh, it doesn't feel as great as beating someone who is also a good fencer. And when I lose to Josh, it doesn't mean that I don't feel bad about losing it. Because at the end of the day, winning feels great and losing feels bad. And especially with the amount of fencing that we do, I feel like it's the fencing that we end up doing ends up being 9 5-touch bouts in the practice and 3 15-touch bouts. So there's a lot of opportunity to win, but also a lot of opportunity to lose. And oftentimes it does go both ways, because we're constantly developing aspects of our own game to try and one up each other, and that's evident in our fights. So, but at the same time, tossing the results and tossing that friendly rivalry aside and tossing all that intensity outside, both of us are learning, and both of us are learning fast, because that environment, as Josh mentioned earlier, pushes you to learn as quickly as possible.
Yep. Yeah, one adapts, the other adapts to the adaptation, and so on and so on and so on, right? And how long have you two been adapting to each other's game? 3 years?
Yeah, best part of 3 years.
Best part of 3 years.
I think over the past year, I think it really kind of accelerated a bit, just because every session that I attend, Ching Ho is normally there, so it always coincides with each other.
Nice. Fantastic. Well, guys, thanks very much for this little chat. So we get another perspective on the same thing. And maybe next time we could do a third session, and I hope maybe we can invite our coach Laszlo to come and talk with us and give his impression of your rivalry and what you've learned from each other in the wheelchair.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So thanks, guys.
Thanks
I'll see you later.
See ya.
Bye.